Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Drew, and I'm here to do my discussion for My Hero Academia Manga Chapter 358. And in this video, not much that I'm really going to go over. I'm just going to cover some differences between the official and unofficial translations, cover some things that I may have missed with my actual review, and just discuss a little bit more about All For One and what his goals could potentially be, and what this chapter provides when it comes to his characterization. And we'll potentially talk a little bit more about Bakugo too. So let's dive into the differences between the official and unofficial translations. The main difference obviously is the titles of this chapter. In the unofficial, it's A Small Step for a Man, while in the official, it's The Guy Who's Made Some Progress. Either way, the same idea is portrayed with both of these titles. And then we get to some of the smaller and more mundane changes between the official and unofficial translations, and that comes from the namings of the certain super moves. For Edge Shot, his move goes from Shattering Paper Thread in the unofficial translations to Pulp Thread Throttle in the official. Bakugo's new gear in the unofficial translation is Area Suppressing Heavy Armor Activated Starfing Panzer, while in the official translations is Suppressive Heavy Mobile Unit Starfur Panzer, or Straff Panzer. And then the slight difference at the end of this chapter in the unofficial translation is Howitzer Impact Cluster Bomb versus Howitzer Impact Cluster. So yeah, just small differences when it comes to the naming conventions between the official and unofficial translations. But a slight difference from the official and unofficial translations actually comes from what is perceived to be Miruko's dialogue in this chapter, where it seems as if the only lines in the unofficial translations is that she mentions that they are together, and she mentions that he's finally learned the art of teamwork, huh? But in the official translation, Miruko brings up this idea of what? As a team? So it's not very clear on whether or not this comment that Miruko made is officially addressing Bakugo as seen in the unofficial translations, or that it's more like in the air on who she's talking about as seen with the official translation. But either way, I think that it's a minor change and it really doesn't warrant any more discussion than this. But something else that I forgot to bring up, and I'm either going to keep it here or put it at the beginning of this video, but My Hero Academia is going to be on break next week, so I probably won't have a review for My Hero Academia out next week, but hopefully I will have a video out. Hopefully there's something that I want to try, and it's going to take a little bit more time for me to do, so I may not have it out next week, but I am going to try to get a video out next week or make a prediction video on what I think is going to be going on next week, because apparently the next 2 weeks or so is going to be My Hero Academia's 8-year anniversary. So the next chapter is going to be a big one, most likely with a color page or the cover of Shonen Jump. So that's something to look forward to in the next few weeks to come. And I think it's weird that it's actually not coming out on a Sunday, but potentially coming out on like a Monday or a Tuesday because of the specific date given, and not that it's 14 days from now. But something that does warrant a little bit more discussion is something that I do not think that I covered necessarily in the review involving Bakugo. And that is when he brings up his speech, or when he's talking about how everyone is working together for this final goal, he thinks about these characters as he thinks about Aizawa and Monoma, Kaminari and Momo. He mentions them via their names in his head. And I'm not sure if this is something that we've actually seen Bakugo do, and how he rarely addresses characters by their name, but when he does, it is for an important reason, and him recognizing the importance of those characters. And we saw a little bit of this before this moment when he's bringing up that he should have expected that Shoto would have been able to take down Dabi, and how even prior to that moment, he brings up this idea, or we see him trying to comfort Shoto right before the war begins. So what Bakugo does in this chapter isn't something new, but it shows like his growth and his development over the series, and how he refers to All For One or Shigaraki or whatever he is as a nutsack-faced handyman, and that this shows that he has a little bit more respect for his classmates after everything that they have gone through by addressing them by their names, even if it's just in his head, which is something that he necessarily would not have done if we're talking about Bakugo at the beginning of this story. So that's something that I missed, and it pretty much emphasizes how well and how much Bakugo has grown and developed throughout the story. So yeah, that's the Bakugo portion of this video that I really wanted to talk about that I missed, but something else that I also probably missed is the difference in Shigaraki and All For One's speech pattern in this chapter. Because in this chapter, we get a speech or a monologue from All For One, or Shigaraki for One, as some people like to call him. And I'm going to see if I can start calling him that, but I probably will mess up a fair amount. But this Shigaraki for One in this chapter is talking and how he wants to control everything and make everyone equal underneath him, and how that is a way for the world to be at peace. And it's something that the heroes want. And this is very interesting because we're getting a little bit more understanding of what All For One actually wanted with his rule of the world, and that this could potentially be building up to something involving All For One, making him not just a stock evil for evil's sake character, but that even though he's doing things for evil, that he potentially could have had a little bit more, I don't want to say positive, but that he does not believe that he will create a world that would be worse off without him, or that he would create a world that would be better with him in charge. And that this is something that we've seen throughout the story of how All For One's influence on individuals is not necessarily as flawed as it could be, as we saw with Lady Nagin, how even though a world ruled by All For One was going to be ruled by him, that a benefit that she saw is that everything would be transparent. So there are things that All For One plans to do that has some form of benefit, but the issue is that he will be restricting everyone's freedom in a sense underneath him. And that's something interesting about All For One himself, and what we could have learned more from All For One if he's still alive. But specifically, the thing that I probably missed in this chapter involving that is that within this chapter, there are slight differences between Shigaraki for One speaking. And that this is something that we as American viewers or readers of this manga can't really pick up effectively, because of this being a story written for a Japanese audience in Japanese. Because if you notice in this chapter, there is a slight difference between the certain lettering text from one area of Shigaraki or Shigaraki for One speech against another. Because you have certain fonts in this speech that is more sporadic and more jagged, while there are other fonts that are more straightforward and neat. And that could be the indication of who is speaking in that moment. So Shigaraki's font may be a little bit more messy, which means that he is speaking in that moment, while All For One's font is a little bit more neat, and that could imply that he is speaking. And it makes sense for that most likely to be the case, because it puts into context what Bakugo is saying in this chapter, and how he doesn't care if the person that is speaking is Shigaraki or All For One, because he's through listening to both of them. And that this is implying that when it comes to Shigaraki for One's speech pattern, it is a combination of All For One and Shigaraki, and that it is distinct enough when it comes to his speech pattern on where you can tell when All For One ends and Shigaraki begins. So yeah, that's something interesting that I missed, and puts into context what Bakugo said and made it a little bit more clear. But yeah, that's pretty much all I really wanted to discuss in this video. This is going to be a more shorter video. There wasn't a whole lot that I could really discuss in this chapter. There's stuff that I can discuss a little bit later on. So yeah, that's all I really have to say about this discussion on My Hero Academia manga chapter 358. And let me ask you, did you notice the difference between Shigaraki's speech pattern when he is Shigaraki for One? Leave your thoughts down in the comments down below. Leave a like on the video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!